There's a lot of extravagant space magic in Destiny 2, but some of the best items in the game are simple and laid back. When you play as the Warlock, it's tempting to turn yourself into a superpowered space wizard, but crazy space magic isn't the only way to get stuff done. In today's video, we're going to build a loadout for the Warlock that pushes the Lunafaction boots to their limits with the Charged with Light system. Let's get started. The Lunafaction boots have been one of the best Warlock exotics for high difficulty content and boss melting for a long time, and they still are. But they can also enhance your moment-to-moment gameplay against rank-and-file enemies. Their exotic perk is Alchemical Etchings. Your rifts gain the additional ability to increase weapon reload speeds. Empowering rifts make weapons more effective over longer ranges. While standing in a rift enhanced by Alchemical Etchings, your reload speed is lightning fast, and I want to leverage that as much as possible. The Loaded Question Pinnacle Fusion Rifle is the best weapon for this task. Its trait Reservoir Burst significantly increases the damage of shots fired when the magazine is full and causes enemies to explode on death. Normally with the Loaded Question, I'd fire a single Reservoir Burst, then stow the weapon and allow its second trait, Auto-Loading Holster, to bypass the weapon's incredibly lengthy reload speed. It's a fun gameplay loop, but with the Lunafaction boots, I won't have to wait around for auto-loading, and the devastation I can cause is increased significantly. Next, I want to punch up my damage numbers without losing any of the safety provided by a healing rift. The High Energy Fire Charged with Light mod will let me do this. While charged with light, my weapon damage is increased. Each enemy defeated consumes a stack. Since I'm using the Loaded Question, I'll be gaining my stacks with the Quick Charge mod. Double kills with a fusion rifle will give me a charge. Then I'll add stacks on stacks and charged up to make generating charges and maintaining them even easier. Stacks on stacks doubles the amount of charges I generate, and charged up increases my maximum charges from 2 to 3. So we've got our increased reload speed from the Lunafactions, the Loaded Question's Reservoir Burst, and High Energy Fire all working together to give us an insane damage output. For subclass selection, the middle branch of the Dawnblade, the Attunement of Grace, is ideal because of the cooldown reduction it receives when giving allies healing or damage buffs. However, because we'll be doing our testing solo, I'm going to play as the Attunement of Fission, the middle branch of the Voidwalker. Kills with my Void abilities will reduce the cooldown of all of my abilities because of the Dark Matter passive. Now, let's get into the field for some testing. Before we dive into the build testing and showcase, I want to give a special shout out to all of my patrons. Algino, Alex, Alfred, Avi, EviPen, Gabriel, Jason, Jay, Joseph, Khaled, Kunaka, Miniflame, Papa Nurse, Ronaldo, Roland, Soul, Slen, the Macman, Tower Watch, and Ziona. You guys are freaking awesome for being willing to provide additional support to the channel. It is greatly appreciated. There are 2 more bonus videos coming for the month of January on the 20th and 27th, so stay tuned for those. And again, thank you, because you guys are freaking awesome. Now let's get back to the video. Alright folks, for today's testing we're diving into the Tree of Probabilities Nightfall Strike in the classic Nightfall playlist. This build is not as extravagant or ability focused as some of the other builds that I've made, but it is still important for us to make use of our abilities intelligently. So now that I'm in my Lunafaction powered rift, every time I fire off my Loaded Question, I want to make sure that I have reloaded it so we get the effect of that Reservoir Burst, and the destruction that it provides is pretty awesome. Now I am going to have to be a little bit careful about how I spend my ammunition because I don't have unlimited ammo with the Loaded Question. I don't have any reserves because my chest piece is not the correct affinity, but that's fine. I still have 10 reservoir shots that I can fire off, and that can stretch pretty long if I place the shots intelligently. So going into this next bit, I'm going to try and put my rift in a spot where I have a decent line of sight of a lot of enemies. They're kind of fighting with each other, so I do have some freedom here to just kind of pick them off one by one. Now there is a big guy off in the distance, so I'm going to use my remaining shots to deal with him, and then we'll just take out the scout rifle. Now, when I was saying that there are ways for me to manipulate my abilities in an intelligent way, whenever I kill something with one of my void abilities, so my grenade or my melee, that is going to trigger dark matter, and dark matter is going to reduce the cooldown of all of my abilities, which includes my rift. So what I'm going to want to do is place down the healing rift and do work with the loaded question. And then once the rift is gone, I can look for enemies to kill with my grenade and melee ability to speed up the cooldown a little bit. For the rest of the video, we're going to switch over to a garden world. This Nightfall has a lot more enemies in it, and it's a little bit longer, so we can see a bit more of how the loaded question is going to perform with the Lunafaction rift at our disposal. So moving into this next bit, we've got a lot of enemies spawning, and I have to disable this objective so that I will be able to damage the boss. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and I'm going to run back to a covered position. I've got my loaded question ready. I'm going to fire it off into the crowd, and then I'm going to place down the rift and start reloading. This guy is pushing up on me, and I want to make sure that he can't do what he wants to do. So from here, we can just keep doing that reload as much as we need to. The rift is gone, so I'm going to push up now and use some abilities to speed things up just a bit. Get off as many bursts as I can. Now, even though my rift is not active, I can still make use of the sort of default playstyle for the loaded question, where I put it away, allow the auto-loading holster to work, and when I hear the click, I take it back out and send out a burst towards the enemies. And that's what it looks like, man. We get that charge with light going, and the high energy fire is increasing our damage output, and that's stacking on top of reservoir burst, so we're getting ridiculous amounts of damage with every single shot that we take. And here we go, we got another nice batch of enemies to destroy, but this level of destructive power that we have with the loaded question is an absolute joy to manipulate. That's 3 shots and we killed 14, 15 enemies, 16 enemies. That's a lot of bang we get for our buck. The loaded question is not a DPS powerhouse, but it packs a great punch for large groups of enemies, and it's a solid amount of damage against major enemies as well. So you're not going to see the best returns against bosses and even champions. The loaded question is going to struggle a little bit, but for clearing out the rank and file enemies, the big mobs, it's going to be great. And even against a meteor target, you can sink a couple of shots into them and you'll be just fine. To wrap things up though, this build is on the simpler side of things. There isn't a lot that you have to do to make things work. There isn't a complicated gameplay loop to engage with, but of course there are ways to optimize it. If you are looking for a solo focused play style, then going with the Attunement of Fission is a good way to go, because you can place down your rift and then get that cooldown reduced with dark matter by killing enemies with your grenade and melee. But if you are playing with a more coordinated team, you can make use of the Attunement of Grace, and you'll basically have unlimited Lunafaction rifts, and you will only be limited by your ammunition capacity. But however you slice it, it's a very, very powerful way to play the game. The loaded question is without a doubt the most explosive way that you can manipulate the Lunafaction boots, but there are a lot of other weapons that will benefit from a faster reload as well. Something like the Izanagi's Burden is gonna be a nice choice. But the main difference between the Izanagi's Burden is you're going to be using that thing as a single target DPS powerhouse if you're equipping the Lunafaction boots to increase your reload speed, whereas something like the loaded question, you get that area damage devastation. So, you know, it's pros and cons to whatever weapons that you decide to use. Now, the last bit of cool stuff that we can do with high energy fire is manipulate it against a boss. So the only time we lose the buff is if we kill an enemy. So right now, I have the effects of high energy fire triggered while I am using my heavy weapon, and this damage buff is not going to fall off until I get a kill. And because I'm fighting a boss, it's not going to fall off for a while. And even as some ads start spawning, I'm going to be able to maintain the buff for a pretty long amount of time. Especially if I use my abilities to secure a kill, I still have high energy fire active. But then if I switch over to my fusion rifle to start getting kills again, then the buff is just going to refresh itself. So I basically I have a pseudo rampage effect on all of my weapons. And the effect is very consistent and very easy to keep active. And there we go, that's going to do it for the build for today. Again, it's not very extravagant, but it has a lot of raw effectiveness attached to it. High energy fire is one of the most universally beneficial of the Charged with Light mods. You don't have to do too much fancy stuff to your loadout to gain the benefits from it. And then combining that with the faster reload speed from the Lunafaction boots with the insane area damage potential of the loaded question, it's a lot of fun. With all of that said, we're going to wrap things up here, but don't worry, there's plenty more coming in the future. So as always, if you enjoyed this video and you'd like to support the channel more than you already do just by watching, liking, subscribing, or commenting, you can head over to patreon.com/iBluairJgR to become a patron. As always, the name of the game is Destiny 2, the name of the channel is iBluairJgR. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.